Welcome to another episode of the Drew Aversa Show, where I feature outstanding people across my 10,000 plus network on LinkedIn who are doing amazing things in life and leadership. Today, my guest is HT Tran, Army veteran, CEO of a construction company, and all around patriot, amazing warrior, and dear friend. HT, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, Drew. I really appreciate it.
HT, you and I met years ago when we were both in the construction industry. You were leading one of the fastest growing companies in San Francisco in heavy civil engineering construction. And what really struck me when we met was we were talking about our transition, your transition out of the military with an injury, and my transition out of public safety as a firefighter with an injury, and just the challenges of reintegrating into civilian life and then finding a sense of purpose. So I would love to focus our conversation today, as so many people will be transitioning as we are in this pandemic of COVID-19, losing their jobs, maybe a calling, a reset to transition again in life to something new, something different, something scary, and something that is truly courageous that you and I have both had to do. So, HT, just if you want to give everybody a background of how you got from life in San Jose, California, to where you are today in Austin, Texas, that would be great.
Well, I was born and raised in California. I mean, I'm a California native. Lived there my whole entire life. And then 2006, I enlisted into the Army, did my one combat deployment, got severely injured, and came home and got medically retired. And then what I did was I did kind of an internship at a big defense contractor, but just realized that, you know what, that wasn't for me, and that was probably kind of one of a hard transition, especially when you're focusing on your career path, which you thought was the one. I've learned that the one career is probably going to lead you to other opportunities as well. It's not really a dead end kind of type mark, because people set their minds like, hey, this is what I got to do. You get stuck there, right? And it's very hard to transition out. And I think most of the transitions have been really a lot more mental for me than it has been physical. And so, after being medically retired, and doing this round of internship with this defense contractor, I just realized that I just couldn't sit behind a cubicle, right? And I just felt like I was kind of rooting myself onto the floor of this cubicle, and my breath was being taken away every day. And it wasn't anything that the defense contractor did. It just wasn't like what I had remember prior to the injury, where I was active and I was doing things. I had a purpose. And I think part of that transition is redefining your purpose of what you want to do, right? I mean, life is always going to hand you lemons, and it all depends on what you want to do with those lemons, and you can either pick it up and toss it and you have nothing in your hands, or you can make lemonade out of it. And I know that's kind of a cliche to say, but it's a process, right? And I think what people, if it helps anyone, is to remember it's not the end result that matters. It's the journey along this transition that really helps build who you are. Because if you really think about it, we're in a time of our lives where we can get anything instantly. It's like instant gratification. But when it comes to your personal transition, there is no instant gratification, right? I mean, there's very probably 1% of us that can make that kind of transition, but for the 99% of us, it's a journey that we have to go through. And I think a lot of the times through this transition, people don't appreciate the journey, because the hardship, the suffering, it makes us feel like we're on our last breath. But in reality, those are growing learning lessons inside you that you can filter out to use as resources and tools. And we always forget that we're a lot stronger than what our mind tells us. And it's just a matter of connecting your mind and your heart and your soul together to get you out on that path. And after 10 years of being in the construction industry, I transitioned one more time after that. And it was a matter of what was my purpose in life, right? And I was on a very great salary. I had a really great company that was growing. We were over 150 employees. We had just hit our threshold of our for 2017 over $60 million. Um, you know, and things were going great. But then at the same time, one of the things I realized that was after my daughter's birth was that I had missed out on a lot of part of my son's life. Building this great company and being sitting in traffic for 2.5 hours one way, 2.5 hours the other way, a lot of chunk of my time that I didn't get to kind of be the father that I wanted to be. And that was really kind of the crossroads for me, was what was more important, being this big defining CEO, and I could take the company to the next level. But I wasn't happy with myself and who I was becoming, or transition and focus on the real purpose of my life, and being a father and a good husband, and spending this time and creating another opportunity down the line, knowing that I can always do that. And I took that, and I left California to, we won't talk about the politics today, but, and I picked up my family with my wife's blessing and grace. And we got up and we moved to Austin, Texas, and I would say the last 2 years has been kind of a great, nice little hiatus for me. I've been able to spend time with my kids, do all the things that you take for granted, like picking them up, dropping them off, or making their lunch, or going for a walk, or, and a lot of those times. And not only that, but, in California, I think people spend most of their time sitting in traffic, and that just takes up a lot of your day. And I wasn't able to focus on those things. I wasn't able to come home and do that. By the time I got home, you know, he was already almost getting ready to go to bed, or we would have a late dinner and then it'd be bedtime. It wasn't really a whole lot of time um, to kind of figure that. So the transition was very important to me, and that's the reason why I made those transitions. But I think every point in my life during these transitions, I've learned to appreciate uh, the journey. The journey is so. I mean, it takes a moment of reflection to see where you're going. Because sometimes you feel lost, but being lost is where I think the growth is at. Because then you stop what you're doing and you're no longer like a zombie moving in one direction, but you get to stop and think about, wait, let me turn around real fast and see how far I've come. And I think that question right there is, how far have I come, will reset you back with a new purpose to keep moving forward. Does that make sense to you, Drew?
Absolutely. And I firmly believe in the journey, and that, whether it's pain or these things, that they are our greatest teachers if we allow them to be, instead of wallowing in self-pity and suffering, which is a normal thing to do until we start awakening and really realizing that these are tools to teach us to evolve. I think, you know, in a leadership capacity as well as a spiritual being,
No,
and
100, and I totally agree with that. I think, a lot of times people, they always say, a lot of something is never really good for you anyway. You want to enjoy those moments and bits and pieces. As soon as you think you got enough, you got to go. But we as human beings, we don't know when enough is enough. We kind of sit and we kind of drown our sorrows. We kind of play the pity party to a point where you're at the bottom of the barrel. There's really no way out but to climb up, to go, move forward, or climb out on top. And it's a matter of knowing when that limit is, when you're done with that limitations, and then you set new limitations so that you can move to the next level of your journey.
so one thing too, HT, that I want to talk about is that reset point. I think a lot of people, depression is so common in the US. You and I have talked about, our journeys, right, with veterans and post-traumatic stress, and which just has a very negative connotation to it. And the reality of it, it's anxiety at one part, and it's depression at one part, and trying to piece everything together to move forward. And once you heal and you move forward on that journey and you do the work and the healing, which I share is counter to America, right? Because America is all about shareholder driven stuff, quarter by quarter, results, 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 pills, pills, pills. And healing is really time driven, and it's far beyond this flesh, that we live in. It's a spiritual thing too. And For me, I realized that there was a reset point that I never wanted to allow myself to go past again, because that's that spiral into the dark hole. And once we know that, there becomes a choice to do the things in life that we need to do to keep ourselves above that that point, right, of sliding into that bad spot. What are the tools that you've amassed on your journey to bring more mindfulness, more peace, and and healing from your own recovery? Because you went through a severe injury just like I did, and I think the odds were kind of against both of us to walk and have a normal life, and we both came out of that. So what are some of those things that you've used, HT?
Well, one, I attribute my transition and my recovery, my healing through my family and friends who were there for me. But you know, as much as everyone wants to help you out, you have to be willing to help yourself out. And that's a very important statement, because we get so caught up in how the way we feel about things, but all you're doing, you're sitting there is you're thinking about how you feel, and you're not executing on what you should do to get to that next feeling of empowering yourself, right? And it really comes down to the willpower. But I think what people will do is sometimes you get caught in that willpower, like I can do this, and then you hit a setback, and you're not anticipating that setback, and then now you're taking a few steps back. I just want the audience to know out there, having setbacks is that when you're moving forward with your willpower, the power to want to do something, but to empower or to better yourself, you're going to encounter setbacks. And setbacks is actually not a bad thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that's part of the reset button. Because you think about it, you've been stuck in this one place for so long. To move forward you're heading into new territory. And when you're in that new territory, it's the territory of unknowns, right? And you're not going to know what everything that comes out of that. It could be good, it could be bad. But just if you expect a setback, you can always tell yourself, hey, I need to take a moment here, a stop. Hey, let's pause this right now. How do I feel about you? Check in with yourself. And once you're comfortable, you can restart that journey. I think what happens is a lot of people encounter that moving forward, and you get a setback, and they just stop. And as we used to say in the infantry, either you move forward or you go backwards, but you don't stand still. If you're standing still, you're a target for someone, but most likely a target for yourself, right? And if you're not moving one way or the other, then you're kind of stuck in a stalemate. You put yourself in that position of being in a stalemate. And it's always better to move one way or the other. You know what I'm saying? And so I think, expecting that setback has helped me out in so many ways. Like I go, it helps you go with the flow, right? You're not expecting everything if you're kind of fooling yourself, if you're expecting that, hey, I'm ready to heal and I move forward, and you think that everything is going to be 100% easy, or it's it's a set path for you, and it's not going to be. Because what happens is that we mentally like to screw ourselves a little bit by moving forward, like, hey, everything's going good, and then all of a sudden something happens, and we forget that we should probably look back to see how far we've come. Because it doesn't matter whether you moved 1 inch, 1 foot, or 1 kilometer. As long as you're moving into the direction that you want to head to, there's progress. And I always, I mentor a lot of veterans, and I always tell them, look, progress is progress, right? It may not be the same, it may not live up to the expectation that you're living right now, but the end game is to get to that point B, right? And that journey from point A to point B, there is going to be a lot of stops, a lot of setbacks. It might take you longer. You can't just. And the other thing too, I think one of the greatest mental tools that has helped me a lot during my transition is not to compare myself to anybody else. We, especially here in this country, love to compare ourselves with other people. And it's almost like you're building this mental race for yourself that isn't even really happening. And then what really basically it is, it's the envy, the jealous, like, hey, how come that person got there? And you need to put yourself in a better position to not think that way, because your own progress is, like you said, it's all matter of time based. and how much work you put into it could carry you a long way, or it can carry you a short way. But you got to remember, it's about how strong those steps that you set into the ground of moving forward it is, because you don't want to falsely move forward and then all of a sudden the ground underneath you breaks. You know what I'm saying? Because that's your foundation of your core values, your beliefs. Does that make sense, Drew?
Absolutely. And then your experience, you talked about the cubicle, and I've always joked around. I said cubicles are one step above being incarcerated in jail. You get to at least go home at the end of the day, but being stuck in a cubicle for 8 to 10 hours of your day as an adult throughout your human existence is, it's not pleasant for many people. And we see this with the lack of engagement in the workforce, that over 50% of people report feeling not engaged, with their work. We see this with the health issues, the sedentary lifestyle that we have in the US, where, productivity kind of at any cost to human health. So these things, HT, when we go from a service career as a firefighter working in a busy company, to whether, into a veteran like yourself, being in the Army, being on forward, operations, and we're busy and we're active. How do you go dealing with the cubicle environment and transitioning into being sedentary? What's your advice, your top 3 nuggets to veterans transitioning who will probably have to take an office job at some point
Right.
because you need a job?
And I just kind of wanted to disclose too is that there's nothing wrong with a cubicle job. That's if you want that, right? But if you're used to an active job and you're in this type of environment, but you got to remember too, we always got to take accountability for ourselves. Like, hey, we signed up for the job, we got to know. But I think there's some ways to cope with that. Is I think when you're setting a cubicle job, everything's pretty much kind of in a routine set base, right? And I think for veterans, we like our routine, but then we also like the challenge. I think when you're in a cubicle setting, you're going to have to be a little bit more think outside the box or communicate up on what you're looking for, right? Like seek out your challenge. Because I think what happens is you get so caught into your daily routine of being in the cubicle, you're not seeking the challenge when an obstacle hits. You take that as your challenge, and it really isn't your challenge. It's just an obstacle to get through to the due process. But that's not the challenge you're looking for, because when I think of challenge, I'm looking for personal growth. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is not a logistical type thing or a day-to-day resolution for you to complete your job. It's more the challenge is really how am I going to grow? And I think in that kind of setting, there's nothing wrong, especially for veterans or service members or first responders that are now transitioning into a new career. That if you feel like you're stuck in that cubicle, I promise you, if you communicate that to your higher ups, to your manager, that you're able to have an open line communication and say you look for a challenge, I think a lot of these leaders would be more than willing to pass on that challenge to you or help you grow, right? And I think for us service members who have been in uniform, we're not one to kind of pound our chest. The majority of us will not pound our chest. Probably a selected few. But for those of you who aren't used to doing that kind of things, having that open line communication, you're going to have to tell someone what you want. I think the other thing too is also you have to kind of define your goals of where you want to be. And it has to be short-term goals, right? We always, it's such a common thing to say, hey, set a 1-year goal plan, 5-year, 10 years. But if you're lost, how do you get to those goals? And even though you set a time limit on it, all you're doing is putting more pressure on yourself. So what I would say is make it even a shorter timeline of, like, say in 6 months. If I haven't gotten there, you build in those options for yourself. That way, when you get there and you feel like, hey, I haven't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, then you already have, a plan Alpha, plan Bravo, plan Charlie ready to go, so that you can have your options. So you're kind of setting yourself, anticipating where you're going to head. Now, if you reach your goal on that certain time limit and you're already there, you still want to sit down and create a plan when you reach there, to help you get to the next level, right? The whole point is to move forward and then to grow yourself, not, everyone's always like, hey, if I move up, that means it requires promotion. That's not necessarily what you need sometimes, because sometimes that's just um, pressure that you're adding onto yourself. And it's really more of an external thing. And when I say a challenge, I'm really looking for, what I'm really referring to is the internal conversation dialogue that you have with yourself on what you want, you know?
I think that's a great point, HT, because in my career journey, I've taken jobs that paid really well. I've had other jobs that had more power and influence in the title and the role, right, at director levels. And then I've also gone downstream to learn different things, taking pay cuts in a sense to learn different things that I've wanted to learn on my journey, right? Because I would say, trying to find purpose. Maybe you can relate. For me, it felt like that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where you're flying over the open ocean, and then all of a sudden things don't go right, and boom, you're in the ocean with a life raft, no plan. You don't know which way is left, right, north, south, east, west. You have very few tools that the big world recognizes, and you're trying to survive. You're trying to survive financially. You're trying to survive with a job where you have that same feeling of purpose every day that you show up, that same feeling of energy and enthusiasm, as well as an environment where our communication style, right, I would say is a lot more direct in military and fire service, because things are on the line. We don't have time to get into the corporate politics and 2-3 years of game playing just to elevate and what the right talk track is and this and that. If you wait that long in our professions, our former professions, people can die. Your teammates
Right.
can die.
Correct.
So what is your advice, on if you get in that open ocean, you don't know where you're swimming, you don't know where you're going, how do you start finding the right resources? You found an incredible mentor, somebody who invested in you to start Anvil. How did you go about finding that?
Before I answer that question, I like to go back to your reference. I thought your reference with the castaway is really good. I know most of the time in our daily lives, I'm pretty sure at some moment we feel like we're casted away on that island by ourselves, right? And there's only really two options for you to do if you're in that situation. Either you choose to die and you kind of like start to deteriorate slowly, or you choose to live. But you got to understand, if you choose to live, there's no greener grass on the other side for you anyways. It's just a matter of collective decisions you choose to make for yourself, to challenge yourself, to get yourself out of off that island. Does that make sense to you? And to go back to answering your question, with my mentors, how did I build those relationships? Those relationships were built over time, and it's just like any other relationships that you would have with either a family member or a friend or something like that. I chose mentors that I can communicate with directly and be open and honest and tell me and be really honest with me on whether I'm doing things right or I'm doing things wrong. But you got to understand, the right and the wrong things are all perceptions, right? And you're asking for someone to give you that perception. What you're going to have to do is kind of swallow your pride, your ego. And I think that's majority of this transition is hard, because it really comes down to your personal ego, your personal perspective of yourself. And if you're willing to bring on a mentor that believes in you, and then you're willing to accept the the truth from the outside perspective, that's going to be something that can be a great humongous resource for you in your life moving forward, right? Because these people who are your mentors aren't your friends. They're not going to sugarcoat things for you. You're going to be like, well, you know what, here, hey Tran, let me tell you something. I didn't agree with that, and they're going to tell you why. Whether you agree or you disagree, the concept of listening is almost empowerment, instant empowerment for yourself. Because later down the road, I guarantee you, whether you agree or you disagree, there's going to be that time period where you reflect back on that conversation, and you're like, you know what? Maybe I can change it or tweak it, or you use certain parts of that conversation that is helpful to you moving forward in your transition. And that's what I did. I brought in, I had a mentor at Walter Reed Medical Center when I was severely injured. Bob Nilsson was always there for me. Bob Nilsson was a retired Marine captain, was not going to take anyone's BS. If he was going to work with you, you were gonna hear what he had to say. And you don't take his words very lightly, because he's going to tell you, what his thoughts were and why he thought that. And if you're not used to truly listening to people, especially when they're trying to help you, and you can't absorb that in. Now, you don't have to agree. I'm not saying that you have to be yes, yes, yes the whole entire time, but as long as you can absorb that information and let that sink into for your mental health, and decipher for yourself what is good for you and what it's not. Bob Nilsson has, till this day, and it's been over a decade, has been a tremendous, tremendous, um, you know, uh, pillar of my life. Another mentor I had was Mike Conklin. Him and I uh, did not connect right away, and he was the chairman of a veteran organization called the Sentinel of Freedom. Him and I did not instantly connect. We kind of bumped heads, but I respected that, because he wasn't going to let me give up on myself. And when I thought I knew what I was going to do or how I was going to do this, and he said, "No, you're wrong. This is what you need to do. You need to recover, work on yourself first before, because when you're a service person, you're so used to helping out others, you forget about yourself. That's just that's just the natural process of who we are as service people. Worry about others first, and you worry about yourself. And he made me flip that around. You take care of yourself first. You can't help yourself. If you can't help yourself, you can't help out others. And that took a very long time to sink in, because I was frustrated. Like, what do you mean? Like, I can see a case, but the problem is I wasn't going to help myself. You know what I'm saying? And those two mentors have been, I can't even tell you, life and professionally has been kind of really, really help rebuild my foundation on how the way I do things in my life, professionally and personally. And then along the ways, personally here, I really want to mention two sets of people. One was my godparents, who had this undying, relentless, strong faith on I had just lost it all, during my deployment, and I was questioning that side of things. And my godparents, the first set of eyes when I opened and I saw staring at me, was them. And that helped build my structure, really personally, on on my outlook on when I was going to have my own family, right? I mean, because when I was a soldier, I had given up a family. That was my one sacrifice. Like, I'm never going to get married until I'm done with this career, because that's what I wanted to do. I had a lot of aspirations to move up in my infantry career. And the other person, my rock, is really my wife. During this transition recovery, you get so used to communicating and doing things one way that when you add another person in, we are creatures of habit. You don't change, right? And I have a tough, strong woman that I married that will not allow me to do certain things if she doesn't think it matches our values, or the things that I say. She's there to kind of to remind me, like, hey, you approach, especially when it comes to parenting. Oh my God, let me tell you something. I may be a man in the household, but let me tell you, I am not the king of the household, especially when it comes, because my wife is the pillar and the foundation of our family. Because when you transition so many times, it's almost, you're always evolving, right? And you need that person there who has that very strong foundation in faith, her profession, her family, and I lean on her to get me through what I need to go through. And as a man, sometimes you think like, oh man, that's your role. And I would tell you that you're not always going to have to be one to carry the rock. And that's a very hard and long
That's a
thought
whole
process
nother
to that.
conversation.
Oh, it sure is. And because when you're a man, you think that you're beating your chest, like, I'm the one that's supposed to be carrying this. But when you can't, you got to remember, you're just one pillar of that foundation. You know what I'm saying? And that has been really my saving grace for my transition through life. And every single time I hit another bump, you know, and I hoping the audience can hear this, is every single time you hit a bump, you just got to remember you're never alone. You'll have people that love you and support you. And sometimes it may feel like you're out on that island by yourself, but you're really not. The water eventually leads to somewhere else. It's not like the old, European theory where if you go far enough into the water and all of a sudden there's an edge and you fall off. The world is circular. At some point, you're going to hit something else. It's just a matter how do you want to tread? Do you want to tread there and stay there forever, or do you want to start swimming? And that's kind of the mindset that I've had over the last probably 12 years since having this started my journey on this transition, and continue every part of this journey. You're going to evolve, and when you evolve, there are going to be more transitions.
And one of the things too, HT, is you mentioned, marriage, and then we were talking earlier on to communication, right? So that's something that I want to touch on, because whether it's in your house, your marriage, or with your children, communication is key. And when we come out of a service profession that's always amped up, we're always ready to roll. There's always a perceived threat, different things going on. Like I mentioned, the communication style is very direct. It can be perceived as very aggressive to the civilian population and the
It's
workforce.
like an order. It's like you're giving out an order, and you think
Exactly.
you're just, and it's for between two service people, it's just another conversation, right? I mean, there's no emotional response involved, especially when your service is around the same group of people. You tend to be, that group tends to be a part of you internally, right? And so they're like, oh, it's just us communicating. But to the outside world, everyone outside that little circle, it's like, wow, this guy is like aggressive, like he's an a-hole, like, and we mean no harm. There's no ill intentions on that, and then, but part of that is that at some point, as we're transitioning out from our service, we only listened to what we wanted to listen to, was because we're looking back into our past. You understand what I'm saying? And so you're like, oh, this is okay when how you do this, but when you're moving forward, it's not how the way you communicate, it's how the way you listen. Let me tell you, that is a lot. I'm only laughing because it's taken me over a decade of walking on this journey to finally understand that. I'm going to share this. Maybe about 18 months to 2 years ago, I kind of hit this rock bottom, especially going through this transition of CEO and then, moving over here to Texas. At some point, I think I just kind of fell into quicksand, like I didn't know. And then I had all this pressure, the stress. I wasn't communicating to anyone, but I also wasn't listening to anyone either. And I had reached this certain point and I went to my current therapist now, and we were talking about things. And I just realized, you know what? During this 10 years, like I've been, just like every other infantryman, you move forward. I got to reach the objective. I got to do this. I got to do that. And you're set, and you're so focused and you're set. But somewhere along the line, I just stopped listening. I didn't listen. I always listened. I was beating to my own tune, because when I got there, I'm like, what do I do next? Like, there was pretty sure there was a set of goals and instructions that I was supposed to do when I got there. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. And by not listening, I lost a lot of things, and then when I say things, I'm not talking about materialistic things. I lost a part of myself. My marriage was kind of bumpy. I wasn't even listening to my own son. I was there, I was present. People always talk about being present. It's great that you're present, but are you listening? Are you observing? Are you seeing? That's part of the transition, because it's supposed to build new appreciation. And when you stop listening and you stop observing and you're just there to be there, and I think a lot of our transitions are that way, because we're used to doing it that way, where, hey, as long as I'm present, I'll get credit for this. Where's the real credit if, in order for you to move forward, you had to listen to a lot of things? You had to listen to yourself is one thing, but you got to listen to the people that are supporting you as well. And I think when when we talk about that transition, if you're going to get anything out of this conversation, is you have to build a support system and you have to listen to your support system, but you decipher what is right for you and what is not right for you. But listen anyways, because down the road, it may not be good for you right now, but down the road, when you hit something, you're like, you remember and you listen to that conversation, you will recall on that conversation, and you'll be like, you know what, got it. You know what, I understand now. And when you understand, then now you've just progressed into your journey of transition. I hope that all makes sense. And if it doesn't, Drew, I'm really hoping that you would help me guide that question to help make it clear for the audience to understand that what I'm talking about.
HT, I think it makes sense, and I'll just expand upon that just through my lens of faith, right? And we all have different faiths, which I fully respect because that's deeply personal. I would share, through faith, some faiths believe that the journey is laid out for you and that we're here to learn the lesson, and that certain things happen for us to evolve, to learn the lesson. And the sooner we learn that lesson, from my own experience, I can look back now and know why everything happened. All of the hard times, why I lost my career in the fire service, why I lost that due to injury, why I'm no longer able to run like I used to run, because I used to run out all my pain. And it was avoiding having to sit with it. And when I sat with it, I was able to understand it. And once I understood it, I was able to grow from it and to let it go and to not go back into it.
And you were also able to communicate that too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, totally.
And I would share
100%.
for our listeners too, the vulnerability you shared today, HT. Thank you for that, because, as men, I think, you and I both met. I'll never forget that day at Hotel Vital in San Francisco. And we sat on that couch and we talked business first because that's what we had to do. And after that, I knew your story. And I asked you, HT, I'm having a very hard time transitioning right now. And I was almost in tears. And you were my friend in that moment in time forward. So yes, business will always come, but these are these deep personal relationships through vulnerability that if you're listening, people, all you have to do is ask. It's scary as hell to ask, let me tell you that, because you don't know. But that's what trust comes in. And when you find people you can trust, like my brother HT, you can share a lot more and you can help each other grow in business. You can help each other heal. You can help each other do a lot of amazing things. And that's really what I hope our society, our business cultures can really get to is more of a caring, compassionate, human-centered business environment, as well as our fire service, our military, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have a spirit. We all have a soul and a purpose that is far greater than anything we can ever imagine. As we look back and realize what happened then is to propel us forward to what's about to be.
No, for sure. And I also want to add one more thing in there too, is that through our daily lives, I think, going back to our conversation at the Vitalia Hotel, was that, we're so stuck in our title and role. And all that really is a perception that others have put down upon you. And then you validate that perception by giving yourself a rank, a title, a name and a position to what you do. But at the end of the day, we're all humans first, right? And if you don't listen, you do miss out on those deep connections, right? I mean, if you think about it, if we weren't listening to each other, I mean, we're talking about that was probably almost like 5 years ago when we had that conversation. If we had not listened to each other and was willing to open up even an inch, right? And we're not asking guys to open up your vest and be like, hey, here you go. I'm a open wide book, but to your comfort level on how much you want to share it with someone that you trust, that connection of by just listening to what the other person says and then returning that favor back. Let me tell you, that's really um, that's where the camaraderie comes from. That was the one thing I loved about the Army. Prior to um, to the service, I always felt like I was just a zombie lost, go get your college degree, go to school, graduate that degree, go get a job, build your picket fence, do all these things. But that was so far from the truth because I couldn't build any of those things. And I was lost the whole entire time because I didn't learn to trust anybody, and then when I joined the service, really I learned I had to trust. There was no other option, to be honest with you. I had to learn how to trust. But those people those men that I worked with, my brothers that I trusted, I ended up developing this camaraderie. My perspective of life changed. I looked at things a lot, completely different. Um, and obviously this conversation can lead into another conversation, but I just want to keep it simple. But that was what it was. At the end of the day, when you hit that connection, that's the trust of it, right? And I'm pretty sure you and I can, if you can do another session on trust, because that's kind of a huge one. But once you have that, that's kind of the little, and I'm gonna call it, it's the little pebbles, it's the little rocks that help you lead you on your trail to get. And even if you have a setback, those little trusting moments are your pebbles and your stones to follow the path back onto where you want to transition to, and to being better. And when I say you transition to a better place, it's a place of your choice. It's a place of where you find peace. It's not a place for more of anything but peace, um, good mental welfare, happiness, right? And none of those things, at least in my perception, none of those things, any amount of money, any amount of goods, any materialistic thing can ever put a measure on. Especially if you're a service person and you're listening to this um, video or this taping right now, is that we understand the value of life. And if that has already been taken away from you and you've come back from it, you already know the materialistic things, the money value, the things that money puts a value on doesn't even really matter, because as we're taking that last deep breath, as you're looking up into the eye and saying, I wish I would have done this, I could have done that. The only thing you will draw upon is not your bank account, it's the memories that you created. And that is where the peace and the happiness, if that was your last breath. Some of us have been lucky to get that second chance, like myself. I'm very grateful to have the second chance. But along the way, I have had to learn to create memories, and that's really all my life, to be honest with you. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, I've become so ambitious that I lose sight, right? I only see point B, but along the ways, I'm missing out on the memories and stuff that if the moment when the time of my friend death calls upon me again, and I said, my friend death, I think death is not something that you should fear. My fear really comes from not having the memories or forgetting who I am or where my family is probably my biggest fear. Or waking up and not knowing who I am is more of a fear than the fear of dying. Because as long as I have those in my memory box, even as the last breath is seeping away from me into a whole new world, at least I can go back on that. I can flash hundreds and thousands of memories real fast before I move on to the next part of my journey, which we all are going to go to, so, it's Easter Sunday. I just thought I'd drop that line on there.
HT, thank you so much, brother. And I completely agree. I think the reality of the COVID-19 situation is this: everybody is understanding that there is no infinite life in this exact body that we're in, and that we're facing our own mortality. You and I have dealt with that at an early age. I've also seen a lot of that working as a paramedic and being a person who had to call people dead and pronounce people dead. So whether you're a CEO with a mansion on a hill or whether you're the homeless person in the street, we all die the same. And I really hope that some of these lessons and what you just shared also helps leaders who are in positions of power and influence to really start thinking about this nation, and you and I both have served this nation. We both were willing to, put our life on the line for our communities, mine on the local level, yours on the national level. And we really have to do better, and business is that tool to do better with healthcare, with single mothers, with food, or, so many children don't even have a basic lunch in here, and they have to rely on schools. That was the issue, closing the schools down. Where are these
Yeah.
kids going to get their food? So I really feel we have the wealth, we have the money in this nation. It's again about aligning the purpose, the values, and these reset times for us to catapult into a whole nother version of ourselves, and hopefully a whole nother version of this great nation.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Well, my brother, any final words of wisdom for the audience?
I'm going to say this. If life was easy, then it's not worth living for, right? And these hard moments, they won't be your first or your last, but it is the game of life, right? And as long as if you have the will to live and to listen and to understand, doesn't matter where life takes you. Just be blessed that you're experiencing um, you're experiencing it, right? And it your experiences, your hardships could be a valuable lesson to help save someone else's life. So I just want you to know, don't quit. And if you ever in need of help, please reach out to someone. Obviously, if you're listening to the Drew Versa show, you honestly, if you need help, send him an email. This is a good man here that really does truly care in helping other people. And we are a resource here, and we will, if we can help you out, we will find someone to help you out. But please don't give up, because life is really beautiful, and you don't think so until you're on your last breath and you're like, oh damn, yeah, just a few more seconds or a few more minutes, and by that time it might be too late, you know. Um, so stay blessed, stay humble, love, and I wish you guys all happiness and peace on this Easter Sunday.
Thank you, HT, and thank you again for your service, brother. Great to have you
Oh,
on the show.
thank you, and thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.